The day my father's lawyer called to tell me I'd been written out of the will, I was standing in a hospital hallway in scrubs, still holding a patient's discharge paperwork. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely had no one to call. That's when the lawyer said something that stopped me cold. "Miss Caldwell, your sister filed this amendment 6 weeks ago. But there's something you need to know about the signature on the document. It isn't your father's. Let me take you back to where this really started. 8 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning in October, I got the call that my father had collapsed at home. My sister found him. Or so she said. My name is Claire Caldwell. I'm 32 years old. I've been a registered nurse at Hargrove Memorial Hospital for 6 years, which means I've held strangers' hands while they were dying, talked people through the worst moments of their lives, and stayed calm in rooms full of chaos. I say this not to brag. I say it because none of that prepared me for what my own family did. My father, Robert Caldwell, built a small but profitable commercial printing business from nothing. Caldwell Press. He started it in our garage when my sister Dana and I were kids, printing flyers for local restaurants and church bulletins. By the time I was in college, it had grown into a real operation. 12 employees, a warehouse on the east side of town, contracts with 3 regional hospital networks, including, as it happened, mine. Dana went to work for him straight out of high school. She had the gift, Dad always said. The eye for design, the confidence in meetings, the way of making clients feel like they were the only person in the room. I went into nursing because I wanted to help people in a different way. Dad understood that. He was proud of me. He told me every time I called. I called every Sunday. Dana called when she needed something. When I walked into the ICU at Hargrove that Tuesday, my father looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He'd had a massive stroke, left side affected, speech compromised. The attending physician, Dr. Marsh, told me he was stable, but the recovery road would be long, possibly very long. Dana was already there when I arrived, sitting in the chair closest to Dad's bed scrolling her phone. She looked up when I walked in, gave me a tight smile and said, "Finally." I'd driven 40 minutes. She lived 10 minutes from the hospital. I decided not to say that. "How long has he been like this?" I asked. "Since this morning. I found him on the kitchen floor around 7. She tucked her phone into her bag. "The doctors say he might not get full speech back." I went to his bedside and took his hand. His eyes opened. He looked at me, and something moved across his face. Recognition, relief. His fingers tightened around mine. "I'm here, Dad. I've got you." Dana cleared her throat behind me. "I've already talked to Dr. Marsh about his care plan. I told him I'll be the point of contact going forward." I turned around. "You're not a medical professional." "I'm his daughter. So am I." She tilted her head. "You work nights. You can't be available the way I can. I live closer. I know his doctors from when Mom was sick, and frankly, Claire, you've always been a little," she paused, choosing the word carefully, "overwhelmed by these situations." I had managed a cardiac arrest in Bay 3 just that morning. I did not say that either. "We can figure out the logistics together," I said. "This doesn't have to be a competition." Dana smiled. "Of course not. I'm just trying to be practical." That was always her word. Practical. It was the word she used when she talked over me at family dinners. The word she used when she explained to Dad why I shouldn't be included in the business decisions, even though my name was technically in the original partnership paperwork he'd drawn up years ago, just in case. The word she used, I would later find out, when she sat down with his estate attorney without telling me and began making changes. The family meeting happened 4 days later at Dad's house. Dana had arranged it. She'd invited their accountant, Marcus Webb, and a man I didn't recognize who was introduced as her personal attorney, a thin man named Gerald Pruitt. I walked in to find them already seated at the dining room table. Dad's chair at the head sat empty. Nobody explained why it hadn't been given more than 12 hours' notice. Dana opened by saying that given Dad's condition, they needed to discuss the business. "He hasn't even been discharged," I said. "Exactly." Dana folded her hands. which is why we need to be proactive. Marcus and I have been reviewing the financials. There are some decisions that can't wait. Marcus nodded without looking at me. Gerald Pruitt spread a folder on the table. Your father had a partnership agreement that included both daughters as potential successors. Given the circumstances, Dana has requested that the agreement be formalized in her favor, with a buyout clause for Claire's portion. I stared at him. A buyout? A fair market valuation of your minority interest. Dana would assume full operational control. My father is in the hospital. He can't agree to this. He has a medical power of attorney on file, Pruitt said smoothly. Dana was named 18 months ago. That was the first I had heard of it. I looked at Dana. She was studying the table. When did that happen? Dad and I discussed it after his last checkup. He was having some memory concerns. He wanted things organized. He never mentioned any memory concerns to me. You were busy. Her voice was gentle, which was worse than if she had been cold. You always are, Claire. It's okay. Dad understood. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the wheel. Not from anger. Not yet. From something closer to disorientation. Like I'd walked into a room I'd been in 1,000 times and found all the furniture facing the wrong direction. Dad's house on Birchwood Lane was the house I had grown up in. I knew every creaking floorboard, every light switch, every drawer. I had been there 2 weeks before the stroke, helping him reorganize the garage, the same garage where Caldwell Press had started. We'd eaten pizza on the back steps and he told me about a new hospital contract he was excited about. He had seemed fine. At home, I sat on my couch for a long time. My apartment was small and quiet. I decorated it with plants and secondhand bookshelves. I had a cat named Pepper who climbed onto my lap and stayed there, which was the most comfort I could find that night. I opened my nightstand drawer to look for the old copy of Dad's original will that he'd given me years ago. Keep this somewhere safe, he told me. Don't lose it. Your name is in there for a reason. The envelope was still there. I unfolded it carefully. It was a simple document, drawn up by a different attorney, whose name I didn't recognize. It named both daughters equally as beneficiaries of the business and the house on Birchwood Lane. I thought about Pruitt's expression when I'd asked about the power of attorney. Smooth, practiced, unbothered. Like someone who was used to these conversations going a certain way. I put the will back in the drawer and called the only person I trusted to be honest with me. My college roommate Jess had become a paralegal. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, you okay? You sound weird. I think something is happening with my dad's estate. A pause. Tell me everything. I did. She was quiet through most of it, asking a few quick questions. When I finished, she said, Claire, if a power of attorney was executed while your father had undisclosed cognitive concerns, and if his will was altered in the past 18 months without your knowledge, and if his current condition prevents him from confirming or denying any of it. She stopped. What? You need to find out who actually drafted that amendment. And you need to do it before anyone else gets to those documents. I called Dad's original attorney the next morning. His name was Howard Farley, a semi-retired man who'd handled the family's legal affairs for over 20 years. He wasn't in, but his assistant took a message. Farley called me back that afternoon. He sounded careful. Measured. Claire. Yes, I've been meaning to reach out. You have? Your father came to see me about 4 months ago. He was concerned about some things. He asked me to prepare a document and hold it until the right time. My heart slowed down. What kind of document? I'd rather explain in person. Are you free Thursday morning? I said yes before he finished the sentence. In the days between that call and Thursday, I kept working my shifts and kept visiting Dad in the ICU. He was improving slightly. He could squeeze my hand on command, could nod and shake his head. He couldn't speak yet, not clearly. But when I talked to him, he tracked my face with his eyes in a way that the nurses said was a very good sign. Dana came to the hospital too. She brought flowers, spoke to his doctors in her confident way. updated the family group chat with summaries that always managed to position her as the one handling things. Our aunt, Dad's sister Patricia, messaged me privately once, "You doing okay? Dana seems on top of everything." I typed back, "I'm here too." She didn't respond. On Wednesday evening, I was doing laundry when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Marcus Webb. I need to talk to you. Not about what you think. Call me tonight if you can." I stood in the laundry room for 30 seconds, then called. He answered immediately. He sounded different from the meeting, quieter, like he was speaking in a room where someone else might be listening. "I shouldn't be doing this," he said. "But I've been working with your dad for 9 years, and what's happening isn't right." "What's happening, Marcus?" "The will amendment. The one Dana filed 6 weeks ago." He paused. "I was there when she had it notarized. I didn't ask enough questions at the time. I just assumed." Another pause. "Claire, I've seen your father's signature on hundreds of documents. That isn't it." The room went very still around me. "Are you sure?" "I'm an accountant, not a forensics expert. But I've been looking at it for 2 weeks and I can't make myself feel okay about it. I think you need to bring this to someone who can verify it." I thanked him. I hung up. I sat down on the floor of the laundry room because my legs didn't want to hold me anymore. My own sister had forged our father's signature while he was cognitively compromised, possibly already showing the early signs of whatever had preceded his stroke, and filed an amended will that cut me out of everything. The business. The house on Birchwood Lane. Everything. I thought about the original will in my nightstand drawer. I thought about Howard Farley and whatever document he was holding. I thought about Dad's eyes tracking my face in the ICU, the way his hand tightened when I walked in. I thought she was counting on me to be too overwhelmed to fight. Thursday morning, Farley's office smelled like old paper and coffee. He was a heavy-set man in his late 60s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the kind of deliberate manner that made you feel like every word he said had been considered carefully before it left his mouth. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk toward me. "Your father came to me in August," he said. "He'd been having some episodes of confusion. Minor ones, he said, but they worried him. He wanted things organized before they got worse." He nodded at the envelope. "He also told me that Dana had been pressuring him to transfer operational control of the business. He was uncomfortable with it. He felt." Farley paused, weighing something. He felt that she was treating the conversation as already decided. I opened the envelope with hands that were steady, which surprised me. Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting. The date was August 14th. "Claire," it began, "if Howard is giving you this, then things have gotten complicated, and I wasn't able to explain them myself. I need you to know that I haven't changed my mind about you. Whatever papers you've been shown, whatever Dana has told you, my original intentions haven't changed. You are my daughter, and you have always worked hard and been honest, and I am proud of every part of who you are. Howard has the documents that prove what I actually wanted. Trust him. I love you. Dad." Folded behind the letter was a notarized affidavit, signed by my father in August, stating that any amendments to his will executed after September 1st should be presumed invalid and subject to review, as he had been experiencing cognitive pressure from a family member. He had known, he had seen it coming, and he had tried to protect me. I held it together until I got to my car. Then I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and cried in a way I hadn't since I was a child. Then I drove to work because I had a 12-hour shift and people needed me. I spent the next 2 weeks moving quietly and carefully. Farley connected me with a forensic document examiner named Dr. Helen Torres, who reviewed the will amendment and Marcus's concerns about the signature. She needed time, she said. She'd be thorough. Marcus gave a formal statement to Farley. He didn't minimize what he'd seen. He was clear, specific, and visibly relieved to be telling the truth. I kept visiting Dad. He was in a step-down unit now, improving. His speech was coming back in fragments. Single words, then short phrases. The occupational therapist said he was one of her strongest patients. One afternoon when I arrived, Dana was already there. She was on her phone in the hallway, speaking quietly. She looked up when she saw me and something moved across her face too fast to name before she smoothed it back down. "Claire, I didn't know you were coming today. I come every day." "Right." She glanced at the door to Dad's room. "He had a good morning. He said my name. He said my name yesterday." She smiled thinly. "Good. That's good." She looked back at her phone. "I'm dealing with the Hargrove contract renewal, by the way. Thought you'd want to know since it's your hospital." "That's a significant contract." "Yes, it is. I'm going to renegotiate the terms." She said it casually, like she was mentioning what she'd had for lunch. "It's time Caldwell Press stopped undercharging them. I thought about 12 employees. I thought about my father's handwriting in August. I said, let me know if there's anything I can do to help." She looked at me. For just a second, something complicated crossed her face. "I will," she said, and she went back to her phone. I visited Dad alone after that. He was sitting up in bed, which was new. When I walked in, his face changed. "Claire." The word was slow, deliberate, like he'd been practicing. "You're here." "Every day, Dad." Every single day I held his hand. It was warm. That was new too. I told him about the plants in my apartment, about Pepper the cat, about the pediatric patient I'd discharged that morning who had brought me a crayon drawing. I didn't tell him what was happening with his estate. Not yet. He needed to get stronger first. But as I talked, he kept his eyes on my face. And once he squeezed my hand and said very clearly, "I know." I wasn't sure what he meant. I thought maybe he knew more than I realized. 2 weeks later, everything came together in a way I hadn't planned. Dana had called a meeting. Her lawyer, Pruitt, had drawn up formal documents for the business transfer. She'd invited the accountant, the business manager, and our Aunt Patricia. She had sent me a calendar invite, 30 minutes notice, which I suspected was deliberate. I came anyway. I brought Howard Farley. Dana's expression when she saw him in the doorway was the first honest thing I'd seen from her in months. The meeting started the way she'd clearly intended. Pruitt laid out the documents. Dana spoke confidently about continuity of operations, fiduciary responsibility, the importance of decisive leadership during a health crisis. Aunt Patricia nodded along. The business manager looked uncomfortable. Then Farley set his briefcase on the table. "Before we proceed," he said, with the deliberate calm of a man who had done this before and would do it again, "I need to share some information that affects the legal validity of these documents." Dana turned to him. "Mr. Weir, Farley, I don't think the will amendment filed 6 weeks ago." He opened the briefcase. "Dr. Helen Torres, a certified forensic document examiner, has completed her analysis of the signature. Her findings are that the signature does not match the established signature patterns of Robert Caldwell." He placed the report on the table. "Additionally, Mr. Dawes, Robert Caldwell executed a notarized affidavit in August of this year, prior to his stroke, specifically indicating that any will amendments executed after September 1st should be presumed invalid due to undue pressure from a family member." The room was very quiet. Patricia's voice came from the end of the table. "Dana, is this true?" Dana said nothing. "I'd also like to read a letter," Farley continued, "written by Robert Caldwell in August, addressed to his daughter Claire." He unfolded it and began to read. I watched Dana while he read. I watched her face go through several things. Calculation first, then something that looked like it was trying to be outrage, then, as Farley read my father's words, something quieter and harder to name. When he finished, Patricia put her hand over her mouth. The business manager pushed back from the table. Marcus Webb said, quietly, "I gave a statement confirming concerns about the signature. It's in the forensic file." Dana looked at me for the first time since Farley had started speaking. Really looked. I didn't look away. "You planned this," she said. Her voice was low. "Dad planned this," I said. "In August, When he realized what you were doing, he was confused. He didn't understand what he was signing. Dr. Torres can speak to his signature characteristics over time, and his neurologist has confirmed that in August, before the stroke, he had full cognitive capacity. You went behind my back. I felt something settle in my chest. I found out that someone forged our father's signature on a document that would have taken everything he built and left me with nothing. I gathered evidence. That's not going behind your back. That's protecting him. Patricia stood up. She walked around the table and stopped in front of Dana. She didn't touch her, just looked at her for a long moment. Victoria. Dana, she said, correcting herself. Your father built that business for both of you. He worked 20 years so both of you would have something. Her voice broke slightly. How long were you planning this? Dana said nothing. The room emptied slowly after that. Pruitt gathered his documents with the focused efficiency of someone who has already calculated how to distance himself from the situation. The business manager left without speaking to anyone. Marcus paused by my chair and said, I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I told him the truth, that it had taken courage to say something at all. Patricia was the last to go. She put her arms around me, and I led her, which was harder than it sounds. I should have paid more attention, she said. I kept hearing Dana's version of things, and She pulled back. I'm sorry, Claire. You didn't know. I should have asked. After everyone left, Dana sat at the table alone. I gathered my things. At the door, I stopped. I don't want to destroy you, I said. I meant it. I want Dad's actual wishes honored. I want the business protected for the people who work there, and I want to never go through this again. She didn't look up. I left. The legal process was slower than the dramatic version in my head. Farley filed to have the fraudulent amendment set aside. The court ordered a handwriting analysis. The affidavit was submitted. It took 2 months, and those 2 months were not easy. Dana hired a different attorney, a more aggressive one, who argued that Dad's August affidavit was itself the product of a confused mental state. Dr. Torres's report was challenged, then upheld. Dad's neurologist testified that the affidavit had been executed during a period of full cognitive function. Marcus's testimony was quietly devastating to Dana's case. I worked my shifts. I visited Dad. I took Pepper to the vet when she had an ear infection. I called Jess every few days and let her talk me through the parts that felt impossible. Dad's recovery was extraordinary, the kind that makes medical professionals quietly use the word remarkable. His speech came back in full by the end of November. He was walking with a cane by December. He was home by Christmas. The first time I walked into his house after he came home, he was sitting in his kitchen with a cup of coffee, wearing his old green cardigan. He looked up when I came in. His face did the same thing it had done in the ICU. That same quiet relief. There she is, he said. I sat across from him and we talked for 3 hours. He told me everything he hadn't been able to say, how he'd noticed the changes in Dana's manner, the quiet way she'd begun positioning herself between him and the business decisions, the paperwork she'd brought for him to sign that he hadn't always fully understood, how a moment of unusual clarity in August had frightened him enough to call Farley. I couldn't tell you, he said. I didn't want to put you in the middle of it, and I didn't know how bad it would get. You could always tell me. I know. He looked at his coffee. I'm sorry I didn't. We sat with that for a moment. The business, I said. What do you want to do? He was quiet. Then, it was always meant for both of you. That was always the plan. He set down his cup. But I can't make someone want to be honest. The court ruled in February. The fraudulent amendment was set aside. Dad's original will, and the subsequent document Farley had prepared, was upheld. The partnership structure was restored. Dana was not criminally charged. The bar for fraud prosecution is high. And Dad, in a decision that was entirely his own, declined to pursue it. He said he didn't want the business tangled up in criminal proceedings for years. I understood. Even if part of me didn't agree. What Dana did face was the professional aftermath. Pruitt quietly withdrew from her representation before the ruling. Three of the business's major clients, who had heard through the industry's inevitably small network what had happened, asked for their contracts to be reviewed by different parties. The business manager, a woman named Sandra who had worked for Dad for 8 years, gave her notice. She told me privately that she couldn't work for someone she didn't trust. Dana was still at Caldwell Press, technically. She and Dad had a conversation I was not part of. I didn't ask what was said. What I know is this: she texted me in March. "Can we talk?" I held my phone for a long time. I thought about the dining room table and Pruitt laying out his documents, and Dana saying the word practical like it was a shield. I thought about my father's handwriting in August, the careful shape of his letters, the effort it must have taken to write what he couldn't say out loud. I wrote back, "I'm not ready for that. I don't know if I will be." I didn't block her, but I didn't invite her back either. Spring came. Dad came to my apartment for the first time in years. He sat on my second-hand couch, and Pepper climbed immediately into his lap, and he laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and warm, and said, "She's something. She's a good judge of character." He scratched Pepper's ears and looked around the room. At the bookshelves, the plants, the crayon drawing from my pediatric patient still pinned to the refrigerator. "You made a good life here," he said. "I'm working on it." We had dinner. Nothing complicated. Pasta and garlic bread, and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for no particular reason. We talked about the Hargrove contract, which had been renewed. We talked about the new hire at Caldwell Press, a young designer Dana had brought on who turned out to be genuinely talented, and who, in the way of people who are innocent in someone else's drama, deserved none of the disruption. We talked about Mom, who had been gone for 7 years, and who Dad said had always known I'd be the one who showed up. Before he left, he stood in my doorway and looked at me in the way he'd looked at me in the hospital. Like he was reminding himself I was real. "I want you more involved in the business," he said. "Not because of what happened. Because you've always been someone I can trust. We can figure it out slowly. Slowly is fine." He smiled. "I've got time." I drove out to the old house on Birchwood Lane the following Sunday. Dad wasn't there. He'd gone to a friend's for golf. I walked around the garage where everything had started. Same concrete floor. Same smell of ink and oil and old paper. There was a framed photo on the back wall I'd forgotten about. Dad at the press, young, grinning, with ink on his hands and a Caldwell Press sign that someone had clearly just hung above the door. He looked genuinely happy. I took a photo of the photo. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at the start of this. Quiet people get overlooked because the people around them count on them to stay quiet. They mistake endurance for weakness. They confuse showing up every day with having nothing to offer. What I've learned is this: evidence is quiet too. It waits. It doesn't announce itself or demand to be heard before it's ready. But when it speaks, it's the only thing in the room. I'm not the one who is easy to overlook anymore. Not because I changed. Because I stopped letting other people narrate who I was. My father is going to be okay. The business is going to be okay. And I, for the first time in a long time, am exactly where I'm supposed to be. If this story reached you somewhere real, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to fight to be seen in your own family? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had been rewriting the story without you? You're not alone in that. And if you're new here, I'm glad you found this channel. There are more stories waiting for you, and I'll see you in the next one.